Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Comix Rant Mini. And I'm your host, Arvin Bautista. And this channel is really devoted to having fun and looking at comic books. And comic books are such a visual medium. I definitely have to post up videos so I could show you these pages. I'm not gonna read you synopsize the comic books themselves. I'm not going to go through the story. It's just not fun for me to listen to podcasts that do that. So I'm mainly going to look at the artwork in most of these comic books. Yeah, the story will definitely be in there, but I just love comics as a visual medium. And I know it's like something that grabs people. Like if you go into a comic book store, you flip through these books, right? You see the stuff. And then that's what makes you buy it. That's how it is for me, at least. I'm not looking for the writer most of the time. I have a list of writers that I like and follow, but if the artwork isn't there, I am definitely not going to pick it up. I'm going to sit on that book if it doesn't look appealing to me. That said, this looks appealing to me. This is Matt Lesniewski's Faceless and the Family, #1, issue 1. I actually have all these other issues from I think this is the first arc, 2, 3, and 4. And issue 1 is this crazy double-sized issue. It costs $8, but it is twice the size of a regular comic book, so it's worth it. Now, I didn't know about anything about Matt Lesniewski aside from what I saw on Instagram. So he has an account, and that's how I saw his stuff. He was doing pinups. It looked great. It was fantastic work. But I had no idea that he was actually doing comic books already. And so when he had announced Faceless and the Family, I was so jazzed because I'd be able to get something that was sequential from him. And, you know, as I'm doing research on his stuff, let's just crack this open so it's not just me gabbing. It's quite boring. It's much better to look at the comic book as I'm talking. Much more entertaining for myself as well. Anyway, when I was doing some research on him, I just thought he was doing pinups and this was his first book. Not true. He's been doing comics for a while. And you know what's extra funny is I looked up some interviews with him, and one of the better articles about him interview is in the Comix Journal, and it was done by Jake Zawlaki, and it's actually recent. He was doing an interview because of this comic, and the headline for that was, "I was done with not being noticed," and that's what Matt Lesniewski said. And it's so awesome because I always feel like his art is just there to kick you in the butt, and it's like, hey, take a look, and that's totally what he says he's doing with his artwork. It's totally him going all out, just pulling out every trick in the book just to grab you and look at his stuff and go, wow, that's awesome. I think in the interview, he actually says he was just going to make it so crazy and detailed that you could not ignore it. Whether you liked it or not, you are still going to look at it and remember it as his stuff. And oh yeah, I mean, I love his stuff. This kind of hatching, you know, if you've seen some of my episodes, you know, I'm totally into this like black and white work and highly detailed stuff. And he does like these crazy character designs. And this is all set in this weird palm world. It's like a planet that's shaped like a hand. And, you know, our characters, I think, are in the middle. They start off in the middle, and like all these different appendages on this planet world have different kinds of class systems and so on. And we only really see one of those fingers, I think, and they don't get very far. So he's opened up this bigger world that he hasn't quite explored yet in this first arc. But it's chock full of craziness. I mean, you know, this character is Faceless, and his main thing is he needs to go to a part of Palm World and change his face. And I mean, it's really crazy stuff. Look at this guy. Just the hatch work and the rendering is so great. I think this first issue maybe my favorite of all the books, and it might be hard to tell, but doing this kind of detail work is quite tiring. So I can tell like there's not as much, I wouldn't say detail. There's not as much blocking in of dark shapes into this later book. This is issue 4, by the way. Sorry. Just spoilers, by the way, if you are trying to read this book. But it's just an awesome feat artistically. It's just crazy. I haven't even gotten around to it yet, to telling you guys what some of these pages are going on. But it still is awesome. It's excellent. What I was saying is, this is, I think, the first issues where he really nails down this like stronger dark shapes. And I love it when he has more like high contrast stuff. It looks great. I think the interview actually mentions it himself, that he was not as comfortable doing that earlier on in his career. But you know what? It just looks great. I don't know what he's talking about, because he's really good at it. But check out like some things like this, like the technique right here is very cool. Right. And then these faces, he'll draw like these character faces. They're like rendered so nicely, like this guy's eye bags and stuff like that. The shape of his nose and the cheek. There's a lot of geometry going on here. His earlier stuff, it was rougher, I suppose. He consciously does more geometric shapes within this story. And I think it's also within this world. But, he has characters that all have different textures, and they all seem to work. His pinup stuff, you'll see, like on his Instagram, he will do different kinds of hatching techniques for grays and gradients. And sometimes it's just kind of crazy. He mentions himself too in the interview. Sometimes it's just crazy. But I think here in his book, he kind of manages to balance them all really well. Like this lady's hair is cool. It's like a certain texture, and it is her hair. And then, the hatching on her sleeve is super cool looking, nice gradient tones, and a lot of form. He describes a lot of form, and it's great. Like I'm not sure, maybe in the later issues, he might bust it out too, but how the sleeve has really great creases. He's got thin arms on this big jacket, but in his other works too, he will draw these characters where the folds are almost like the anatomy. Maybe if I can find one, I'll show it to you guys. Like say like the folds on the leg will kind of be like this, very abstract, squiggly fold work that looks like the legs would also be squiggly for it to work. But it's just so great. It's nice to look at. It's like this distinctive style, and he will mix it with like very realistic looking faces and anatomy in certain cases. Like the hands are like very solid, but he'll have like these crazy looking creatures. He's got some cool, you can see this. Actually, I haven't even pointed this out. Some cool lettering work that is also like 3-dimensional. It's almost like wrapping around the images. And sometimes, it's a certain technique where people will do it. I love looking at how geometric this fold work is on some of these figures. And then, like there's all this junk and this kind of hatching I always like. I haven't been patient enough to pull something off like this, but it's just like these little hatch marks that can kind of pile on, but they're not necessarily following just one direction. They're multiple directions, and they're kind of like layered on top of each other, making this kind of netting. He'll kind of play with certain things like this too, like that. It's coming back, this kind of hatching that's like a stripe kind of hatching, if anything, that we saw earlier. And then, he's got a more organic touch here too, where it kind of follows the form on this cylinder like tail. He's got like great perspective, like kind of like into the camera kind of stuff. And this guy's wearing like this crazy, I don't know what it is, this injection welding mask thing. Doom, and then here we go. Thump. but it's very like dimensional. A lot of this stuff is dimensional, and it goes crazier as the series goes. And it's published by Oni Press, so I'm not quite sure how people usually figure out like which one gets the better deal for them. Here it is, Palm World. But you know, like right here, I guess because it's in space, there's a lot more darks, and I kind of gravitate towards these kind of pages that he makes. But you know, this palm has like these rings, and these are the gates. So before you enter there, you have to kind of pass these gates. They're guarded, and there's must be some kind of defense there. But it's the hand planet that these guys live on. And, you know, it's just really fun to look at all this stuff. Just pour through all of them. And then he'll do some cool stuff, which reminds me of Will Eisner's The Spirit, where the sound effects, like, you know, the sleeping, and even the sound, the way this font is made is different from this kind of sleeping. And you can tell like, oh, this is him snoring. This is him snoring. Just because he chose to render them differently. And, you know, the sounds are so real that they are so real. So when things like break, the lettering breaks with it as if it is tangibly there. And I love that. It's such a great idea that is, you know, pulling from classic comics. You don't really see that too much anymore. Just fun stuff that I love looking at here is just how much he renders everything. And here's the Doom again. It's under the floorboard, so you can kind of, it's like this big one too. And then it also functions as the separation of panels. Right? So you can hear it. It's like this physical thing. And then, you know, he's got some crazy looking stuff going on throughout the issue. It's just so much work. It's great. And then, you know, he can play with texture with the way he's hatching things. This actually looks like it's kind of fabric-y, almost furry, right? But it's also the way that he would hatch things. But then this arm looks different. The skirt. Everything. And then checkerboards. I mean, he's throwing every kind of texture in there. And I love it. Even the dithering. Or, well, I guess this kind of hatching is back. Here, he'll do tiles and the later... Oh, here. So I think this guy... Oh, maybe not. He hasn't pushed it too far. But, like, this kind of squiggly foldage, creases on the character's clothes. It's still within the guy's anatomy, but later he'll take on some liberties for it. But, you know, I always love it. Like, this guy, Faceless, has like this belt, and it's just kind of floating in the air. And, you know, they have like massive things. Even Faceless himself has this like giant wire thing that cannot possibly balance on their heads, but because it's comics, it doesn't matter. Her hair is like this awesome starfire hair. And, you know, he meets like all these characters as he travels, and they all kind of join him on his quest. It's primarily for his face, but by the end of the story, you know, he's amassed like all these interesting characters that are there. A lot of the story might be a little jarring because it's so alien. And, you know, some of the character interactions happen kind of quickly, where they bond really quickly. But it's okay. Oh, there it is. There you go. Here's one right here. Where his leg is just kind of like this crazy squiggle shape. Right? Or it's like this really skinny stick leg. But then it looks great. The mass that he describes there is just so nice. Like, I always love looking at cuffs that look like this, and you got tiny little wrists inside them. But he's got massive, you know, beefy dudes there too. And they're just, everything is just so solid and three-dimensional. It's just joy to look at this stuff. It's just so interesting. Like, I do get lost just looking at a lot of these things. It's not in color, it's in black and white, and that might kind of throw some people off, but I think that's why I gravitate to the issues where he does use a lot of contrast. And some of his panels take a little break, right? So he lets it breathe a little bit and then you're back into it. Just gorgeous stuff. Great looking faces. Lots of character. Oh, this guy too. I mean, he, you know, it looks like he just loves drawing everything that he's drawing. And that's, you know, that itself isn't a feat. You know, he's kind of fabricated this world so that he can draw a lot of this stuff, I think. And he can still be interested in doing it. It's crazy character designs, clothing, lots of pattern that are happening. Always interesting. Always keeps your eye moving. I do wish that he would pair up with a colorist. I'd love to see this book in color. Only because I've seen his work with Matt Kint in The Crimson Flower. And that was just, it was awesome. It just looks great. And, you know, I think he colors these covers and they are great. I'll pull in some of the other ones here. He's got great color sense. It might be Dave Stewart. Yeah, there he is again. Dave Stewart colors everything. And the pair up of him and Dave Stewart just look great. I wouldn't mind buying this all over again. Which, by the way, he is going to come out with the hardcover collection on July. Now, I don't know how I feel about that because I was going to support this no matter what. I mean, I'm glad I bought the first few issues. And at that point, it's like, all right, I'm not going to trade weight this because I wanted to support him. But now, you know, there's a hardcover collection July already. That's pretty quick. I forget when this was released. It was sometime this year. But it just seems so quick. It just seems so quick to me to have a hardcover compilation already. And this is the last one. You can see the quality bar is still there. The amount of contrast that I like, I think, is more in that first one. But look at these faces too. This is the 4th issue. You know, he can hit all these expressions and everybody is very malleable. Yeah, look at this guy's pants. See, this is what I'm saying. It's just, but then, like, you know, you got this nice duffel bag and you can really get a lot of texture. But there's also these cool made up, like, ribbony things that he does. Fantastic. Fantastic stuff. Anyway, all right. That's it for this week's Comix Rant Mini, and it's Faceless and the Family by Matt Lesniewski. And I hope you enjoyed it. Give it, flip through, support his work. He's just an indie guy. And yeah, he definitely hit all the right things for me to want to buy his comic. Look at the face. It's great. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I will see you guys next time.